And, but I see everyone assumes it's role play. There's no other way. Otherwise,
Well,
everyone would
no,
be
I
calling
mean,
the
that's not
police.
true. It's not true because, listen, they had 11 million comments on this site annually. And so many of those comments, and so many of them that we have documented and are used as like evidence of their knowledge of what was going on, is that people would be commenting, "This is effing rape." A man named Stephen McIlvany from Northern Ireland who was sentenced to 23 years in prison. And he had actually lured 3 young boys to his house, underage boys, and he tricked and coerced and blackmailed them. He physically brutalized them, causing brain bleeding. He raped them, and then he uploaded the videos of those assaults to Pornhub where they were monetized.
You've single-handedly taken down, at one stage, one of the biggest, the third most powerful, most influential tech firm. Did you face any backlash from this on a personal level?
I've had things from rape threats to death threats to letters being sent to my home, naming my children, their middle names, their nicknames. This is messages from the CEO level, the owners, the VPs, emails, exchanges, employees admitting that they were afraid they're going to go to jail because they were downloading the child rape that was on the site onto their own devices, and the ways that they were counting to the dollar how much money they were making on these under categories that contain child abuse, like teen.
I think everyone that speaks to you will tell you I had no idea that was happening. And I'm going to tell you the exact same thing. I'm sure you hear that a lot. And you've already led to a lot of change within Pornhub. So I was really fascinated to get your thoughts on the industry as a whole, because I think Pornhub is, you could say, the tip of the iceberg now. Before, it was a bigger chunk of the iceberg, at least from what I've heard and what I've researched. But maybe we can kick it off for the audience. Is briefly, what was Pornhub before you did what you did and took action and changed the company, and a new CEO and owner came in?
Yeah, so we can start there for sure. So, in the context of now it's almost 20 years in the fight against sex trafficking and child sexual abuse, I was researching the intersection between what I call the big porn industry and trafficking and non-consensual content. And I came across some horrific stories that we could probably talk about later about children who were being sexually abused, raped, and trafficked on Pornhub. Specifically, I credit the start of what I call the Trafficking Hub movement to hold Pornhub accountable in early 2020 to the story of a 15-year-old girl who was missing for an entire year from Florida. And she was found in 58 videos being raped and trafficked on Pornhub under an account named Daddy Slut. And police were able to match surveillance footage from a 7-Eleven to his face in the videos and then rescue the girl from his apartment. And I was horrified by this story. The London Sunday Times at the same time released an investigation where they found dozens of illegal videos within minutes on Pornhub, even children as young as 3. And at the time, this was shocking because Pornhub, had presented itself to the world as this mainstream, legitimate brand. And they were walking New York Fashion Week, had faux commercials on Saturday Night Live. They were all over the press. And in 2020, they had actually capitalized on coronavirus. And so they were the fifth, according to the CEO's testimony, they were the fifth most trafficked, most visited website in the entire world, not just porn site, but website, with more visits than Netflix and Amazon. Researchers at the time had named Pornhub the third most influential tech company on global society, just behind Facebook and Google. And this was the world's YouTube of porn. So anybody anywhere in the world who had an iPhone could become a pornographer, could film a sex act and upload it online. And they had 170 million visits per day in 2020, 62 billion visits per year. And they had enough content uploaded every year that it would take 169 years to watch if you put those videos back to back. They had 56 million pieces of content on the site in 2020 when this fight against them began. And since then, what we discovered through the course of investigation and victims coming forward and whistleblowers from the company, even the former owner coming forward to expose the company, what we discovered was the site was infested with videos of real sexual crime, that Pornhub was not a porn site. It was actually a crime scene. And we mounted a movement to sound the alarm on what was going on, and hundreds of organizations joined and hundreds of victims and journalists and lawmakers, and so many people came together to hold this company accountable. And today, we have made a lot of progress. We're not done yet, but they've been forced to remove 91% of the entire website. Has been taken down. They lost Visa, MasterCard, Discover, PayPal, leaving them only with cryptocurrency and bank wires as payment options. They lost all major mainstream advertisers. The CEO and the COO were forced to resign. The secret majority shareholder of the company was found and exposed. They've lost 68% of their traffic. So according to the CEO, in 2020 versus the traffic they have today, they've lost actually 68% of the website visitors. And besides that, they've actually been sold as a distressed asset. So they lost over $1 billion in revenue, and they've been actually sued. So I think this is really critical. They've been sued in 27 lawsuits since 2020 on behalf of tens of thousands of child victims across the United States and Canada is where these lawsuits are filed, but the victims come from all over the world. And the company has been criminally charged by the US government for intentionally profiting from sex trafficking. So that's the state of Pornhub today, but we're not done yet because we believe in accountability, we believe in justice. And what is really important is that it's not just about one company. It's important to hold the biggest player in this area accountable because it creates a deterrent for future abusers. So not only is it necessary for victims to get healing by seeing justice served, but also to create an important deterrent effect so that other websites would not enact, the same purposeful policies, that they would proactively work to clean up their websites. And that's what we're seeing. So we're seeing other sites like Pornhub, these user-generated porn sites that are starting to change their policies. They're starting to take down illegal content because they don't want to end up as the next Pornhub. And in addition to that, Pornhub's not alone. Pornhub and its sister site. So Pornhub was owned by a parent company called MindGeek. And actually MindGeek obtained a monopoly on the global porn industry with a $362 million loan from Colbeck Capital. They had actually essentially rolled up the mainstream, most popular porn sites and brands under one site. And then Pornhub was the flagship site and the cash cow of the company. But by holding Pornhub accountable, we're actually holding a large portion of the entire online porn industry accountable as well.
So you mentioned something, children as young as 3 years old?
Yes. Yes, there's evidence now of the content, the crimes on Pornhub have spanned from child rape and sexual abuse, trafficking, adult rape, unconscious rape, as well as non-consensual content. We used to call it revenge porn, but consensually recorded content and then non-consensually uploaded. And, at children as young as 3. 12 years old. Most of the victims on Pornhub have been, teens, like underage teens, as well as adults, and those who are, we call them tweens, so prepubescent children. There was a horrifying case recently in the news of a man named Stephen Mickelwait from Northern Ireland who was sentenced to 23 years in prison. And he had actually lured 3 young boys to his house, underage boys, and he tricked and coerced and blackmailed them. He physically brutalized them, causing brain bleeding. He raped them, and then he uploaded the videos of those assaults to Pornhub where they were monetized. So, one of the important things is that all of this content, free porn's not free. It's heavily monetized. Pornhub was selling 4.6 billion ad impressions on the site every single day. So every child rape that was on the site was earning profit for the executives of Pornhub. And that's why the child abuse, the rape on the site constitutes trafficking, because trafficking means you commercialize rape, you commercialize underage abuse. And so that's why those children, there was also a horrific case of a 12-year-old boy from Alabama that was drugged and overpowered and raped by a man named Rocky Shea Franklin, who filmed those abuse videos and uploaded over a dozen, I think it was 20, over 20 videos of that child's assault to Pornhub with titles indicating this was clearly abuse. And he was sentenced to 40 years in prison for what he did. And so, yeah, we've seen so many cases. Like, these are some examples, but let me tell you, the class actions have been certified on behalf of tens of thousands of child victims. And that's not even counting the adults who've been abused on the site. And this is just who's pursuing justice in court today. There's countless victims across the world.
How did it? So how did these children get on there in the first place? So you gave obviously pretty rare examples of a child being kidnapped and then videos being posted. Um, but for tens of thousands of children being there, did some of them just do it themselves and the website allowed them to do it? Were
Yes.
others coerced by like a ring of a child trafficking ring?
Yeah, so there's a variety of ways that children have been abused on the site, and you're exactly right. And that isn't always a situation where somebody's, missing and kidnapped or, coerced in the way I just described. Some of this is what we call self-generated child sexual abuse material, where today, so Thorn is an organization that is a child protection organization, and they did a study of over 1,000 children. And they found that 1 in 7 children between the ages of 9 and 12 has said that they've actually filmed a nude video or image of themselves and sent it to another person. So this is very common in our digital age, where younger and younger children have devices in their hands, all day long. And so this is happening. And one of the most, just devastating cases that we're aware of is the case of Serena Fleitas. She was, a very young teen in Bakersfield, California. So she was 13 years old. She had never kissed a boy before, but she had a crush on a boy a year older than her who coerced and convinced her to send some nude images and videos of herself to him. And she did. So she sent them to him. He shared them with classmates. They got uploaded to Pornhub, where they were viewed millions of times, and she would beg Pornhub to take the videos down, and they would hassle her to prove that she was underage, to prove that she was a victim. And even if she did get the videos down, they would just be uploaded again and again and again. And the reason why they were getting uploaded again and again and again is because we discovered in 2020 that Pornhub was not verifying age or consent or ID to upload. All they required was an email address to upload to the site. So literally anybody in the world using even a VPN could upload content to Pornhub, and they were not checking whether this is a child, whether this is a rape victim, whether it was consensual. And that is how so much illegal content infested the site. But anyway, she, was devastated by this. She was bullied in school. She ended up dropping out of school. She got addicted to drugs to try to numb the pain. She tried to kill herself multiple times, which is very common for victims of this type of abuse. Studies are showing that it's about 50% ideation rate for victims of non-consensual intimate images being distributed online for suicide. So 50% ideation rate for suicide. And then she ended up homeless, living out of a car. But today, Serena is suing Pornhub. She's not only suing Pornhub, she's suing its individual owners. She's suing its parent company. She's suing Visa for monetizing her abuse. And she's suing the hedge funds that actually funded the entire exploitation enterprise.
Is Bill Ackman involved in her case or a separate case that he's involved in?
Well,
Because I
he's
know he
not really
supported you a lot.
involved. Yeah, he's been a great advocate for this cause. I mean, he was really active in pressuring the credit card companies to make the right decision and stop monetizing the abuse of these victims. A federal judge in California who was on this case with Visa and who denied Visa's motion to dismiss in 2020 said that Visa gave Pornhub the very tool through which to complete the crime of benefiting from child trafficking. And so he has been instrumental in this fight, has really helped in so many important ways.
So I asked 6 people around me in the last 24 hours about Pornhub, asking about these types of videos. All of them assumed, were under the impression that all these videos were role playing.
Yeah, listen, my dad always used to say, assumption is the mother of all screw ups. And that is absolutely true. Everybody was and is assuming that because Pornhub is such a household name, that they must have been vetting the content on the site, and nothing could have been further from the truth. And that was that discovery that was made in February of 2020 to realize that this site was full of illegal content because there was no meaningful checks in place. And not only that, through the course of this movement going viral today, we have over 2.3 million people who have signed the petition to shut down Pornhub and hold its executives accountable from every country in the world. Thousands of media pieces have been written exposing the criminality on this site. Even so many people are completely unaware of what was going on. But it's, people just have not understood the way that the system operated. And in the course of this, moderators from the company came forward. The former owner of the company came forward to me to help expose the site. And what we learned was that they only had 10 moderators working at, per 8-hour shift in Cyprus to monitor the millions of videos that were being uploaded not only to Pornhub, but to all of its sister PornTube sites. And that includes RedTube, YouPorn, GayTube, ExtremeTube. I mean, I could go on and on as far as the tubes that the parent company owned. And listen, 10, and they were reprimanded if they watched less than 700 videos per 8-hour shift. Some of the more experienced moderators were just clicking through over 2,000 videos per 8-hour shift. And they only had one person out of 1,800 employees. They had one person reviewing videos that were flagged by users as containing rape, child abuse, and other forms of abuse. And they had a backlog of over 706,000 videos that had been flagged. And so information like this has come forward. Just Saturday, Nick Kristof of the New York Times released a follow-up to his 2020 article on Pornhub. And what was exposed, and this is just insane, is that the court that was working on the child trafficking class action lawsuit in Alabama on behalf of tens of thousands of child victims accidentally released thousands of pages of court documents that were meant to be sealed, but they were accidentally unsealed and exposed. And this is messages from the CEO level, the owners, the VPs, emails, exchanges, employees admitting that they were afraid they're going to go to jail because they were downloading the child rape that was on the site onto their own devices, and the ways that they were counting to the dollar how much money they were making on these under categories that contain child abuse, like teen. They were refusing to ban the words minor and childhood and brutal and wasted, like all of these things that they were doing that just show the intentionality of the owners in monetizing crime, and the fact that it's insane that they're not in jail right now. Like, that's the takeaway from these thousands of pages of documents, is that the owners of Pornhub should be in prison right now.
Where are they? Which country?
Well, some of
Because I
them
know the
are in
owner, I
Montreal.
know the guy that was running it was trying to be very anonymous. He was anonymous until you and someone else found out his identity.
Yes. So, yes, actually, the former owner of the site who sold the company to him came forward and first revealed his name to me. And it's Bernd Bergmair. So that was the majority shareholder of the site that had hid his identity for years from the public. But he was found and exposed. He was spending part-time in Hong Kong, part-time in London. He was from Austria. And so, yeah, we understand that he lives part-time in Hong Kong, part-time in London. Other owners are in Montreal, so in Canada. That's where they're from. And, there's this kind of farce out there right now saying that the site was actually sold to a hastily concocted private equity firm that has laughably called its name Ethical Capital Partners. But what is also released in court documents is evidence that the site wasn't actually sold. It wasn't paid for. So the former owners of the site, they basically was like an owner finance situation where it's a sale on paper, but it's not a sale in reality, because this Ethical Capital Partners didn't actually have the capital to buy Pornhub. So the old owners are still getting payments, and they're being personally sued by dozens of victims. And that's what I'm hopeful about, justice being served. I'm very disappointed that the federal government has not fully prosecuted. They charged the company with intentionally profiting from trafficking in 2023. And the company had to admit that they did this. But they were offered a deal. They were offered a deal for $1.8 million to defer prosecution. And that's just an unacceptable outcome for what's happened. In order to deter future abusers, in order to bring justice to victims, we have to see both civil and criminal justice fully served. So I hope this new administration takes this issue seriously and actually properly prosecutes this company and its owners for what's happened. And we have the evidence. The evidence is not lacking. It's just enforcement that's lacking.
The good news is we've seen the new owners take significant steps, and correct me if I get anything wrong, but I was listening to their interview with Valuetainment, and they listed all the things they've done. They finally added rigorous verification. So now they need anyone uploading content goes through ID checks, biometric scans, to confirm consent and the age of anyone posting content on there. There's a lot more moderators. They have a few hundreds employed now. Before there was one. You said there was one. Immediate removal policy.
There was 10 moderators working per 8-hour shift, and then one checking flagged videos.
That's crazy. Yeah. They've got an immediate removal policy. So now anything that's reported is immediately removed. Then they review it. Apparently every video, is that correct? Every video is reviewed by a human. More technology. Have they done enough? What would you request from the new owners today? I know they've removed even more content as well.
Yeah, they've been continuing to take down content. Yeah, so I mentioned today they've had to take down 91% of the entire website in what Financial Times has called probably the biggest takedown of content in internet history. But they don't get any credit for what they've done. They've done this under duress. They've done this because they've lost the ability to process credit card payments on the site is probably the most important reason, besides facing so many lawsuits and potentially billions of dollars in damages from the lawsuits that they're facing. And they have a Department of Justice monitor over their site looking over their shoulder now. And so that's why they have taken these steps, but they have not gone far enough. Absolutely not. And you should watch, if you watch their interview with PBD, you should watch my interview. I came on a few weeks later, to kind of refute some of the things, the lies that they were actually telling. But one of the things that they've been saying, which is absolutely not true, and this was reported again in the New York Times recently and many, many times over the past year, is that they still have completely unverified videos on their site, across the site. So
old ones,
where
before they took over.
Well, no, because they were not verifying the age and consent of the individuals in the videos until September of 2023. Sorry, September of 2024. They were not verifying the individuals until September of 2024. Now,
so they only verified the person uploading, but not the people inside the video.
Correct. So, and that was after December of 2020. So in 2021, they started verifying just the uploader. But in so many cases, like the case of Rocky Shea Franklin, he was a verified uploader, but he was uploading videos of a 12-year-old boy who was drugged and being raped on the site. And there's so many cases like that. And so they had only verified the uploader, not the actual individuals in the videos. So they have yet to remove millions of videos that were uploaded prior to that policy change where they didn't verify the age and consent. And we know even today, like they were forced to report under the Digital Services Act in Europe, they were forced to report some of the content that they were taking down. And we know that in 3.5 months last year, they had to take down 3,770 pieces of child sexual abuse material from the site, and over 8,000 images and videos of non-consensual content that would include rape. So they still have illegal content proliferating on the site. They have not gone far enough, and we need to see more. We need to see all of that unverified content come down from the site.
When they find a piece of content like that, do they work with authorities to try to find the perpetrators, or they just remove it and move on?
So this is another crazy thing that we uncovered in all of this is that for 13 years, they were not reporting the child abuse they knew about to authorities, even though, for example, in Canada, there's mandatory reporting laws. So they were actually hiding the child sexual abuse and rape that they knew about from authorities so that they couldn't be rescued, so that these children could not be identified. And we had the heads of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and the Canadian Center for Child Protection. They testified before Canadian Parliament in 2021. And they said, listen, we have not had one single report over the last 13 years from Pornhub about child sexual abuse on the site, even though even these internal documents, all of this, we know that they were aware of so much of this illegal content and they were hiding it because they didn't want their brand to be damaged. They were keeping it from the public.
I think that will make everyone question anything they watch on any porn website moving forward, everything you've discovered, because there's still porn websites right now that don't do near as much as Pornhub, correct?
Yes, there are. So, X videos, for example, some of the biggest other players in the industry still have a long way to go. But the encouraging thing is this, is that by holding Pornhub and its parent company accountable, we are creating a deterrent effect. We are making those other companies more concerned with the risk and liability they face in continuing the same business model of unvetted content. And so we are seeing some changes. But I think the important thing is that we have to keep the pressure on until this becomes a new industry standard where no piece of user-generated pornographic content can be uploaded to a website that allows and monetizes this content without checking and verifying via a third party that this is not a child and that this is, somebody that's actually consenting. They're not a rape or trafficking or revenge porn victim on the site. This is just common sense. This is just 101 prevention for sexual crime on the internet.
You've single-handedly taken down, at one stage, one of the biggest, the third most powerful, most influential tech firm, but also an entire enterprise, criminal enterprise. Did you face any backlash from this on a personal level? Any threats, anything at all?
Oh, yes, it's been really an intense battle. That's definitely sure. But I would like to say this, is that, it wasn't single-handed. I had the honor and I have had the privilege of leading this movement for justice. But one of the most important things that an activist can do is activate other people and to understand you can't do this alone. And that's why it was so important to have, the many, many victims who came forward to tell their stories, and the journalists and the attorneys and the lawmakers and the law enforcement and the businessmen. We mentioned Bill Ackman before, getting involved and people taking their place in this fight. Even those who were in the porn industry were actually coming forward to help because they hated this company and the distribution of sexual abuse on there as much as anybody else. And they actually had their own stolen and copyrighted content being distributed on Pornhub as well, because it wasn't only the sexual crime. It was actually also, copyrighted material that was just being distributed, and they were just, upset about that. So it's been just this wide variety of people. I mean, from the right and the left and, Christians and atheists and pro-porn and anti-porn who are able to coalesce around this message that nobody should be raped or trafficked on the world's largest porn site. And it's so easy to kind of agree on that. But yeah, I have faced a lot of backlash. I mean, I've had things from rape threats to death threats to letters being sent to my home, naming my children, their middle names, their nicknames. I mean, I keep my children off the internet completely, but, saying we're watching you, you're going to get somebody killed. You just all kinds of kind of crazy things, hacking, doxing, that's happened over the course of the last 5 years in this fight. But to me, that's a small price to pay for the progress that we're making and seeing change and seeing justice. And it's really nothing compared to what victims have faced. So it's pain with a purpose, and I would do it again any day.
So I was going through just now the top websites by traffic. So OnlyFans is number one, Pornhub is number two. There's one called XNXX and XHamster. Are they bad as well? How are they compared to Pornhub?
Yeah, so XNXX is owned by WGCZ, so that's the parent company, and they also own X Videos. So these are the biggest competitors, I would say, with Pornhub. And then X Hamster is owned by Hammy Media, and they are another major competitor to Pornhub, as you pointed
Are
out.
they playing by better rules?
So they have
Did you look into them?
started. So they have started. I mean, one thing that Nick Kristof recently reported in his article is that even he was really deeply investigating this back in 2020, and then coming back to this in 2025. And poking around on these different sites and realizing some of the most obviously illegal content that you used to be able to find in 2020 is not as visible on the site today. And they're taking more precautions to, not allow certain horrific keywords where you could find child sexual abuse content. But in no way have they solved this problem. And the only way that we're going to solve this problem is by force. We're not going to see all of these companies just enact the necessary standards by choice because it's the right thing to do. That's why we need policy put in place. So we need government policy put in place, but we need corporate policy also. So we need government policy to require mandatory third-party agent consent verification for all of these sites, or they get criminal penalties for not doing so. But we also need the financial institutions. So we need the Visas and the MasterCards and the Discovers and the PayPals to say, look, just like we have anti-money laundering policy, we have anti-online sexual exploitation policy, and we just don't do business with user-generated porn sites that don't verify the age and consent of every person that's in every video. And this can be done at scale. I mean, we have the technology available today to be able to do this at scale. We just have to force these companies to do it. And I think being able to use the lever of the financial piece of this is so important, because we understand these sites are highly motivated by credit card company demands and financial institution demands. And if they enact those policies, we're going to see transformation across the user-generated pornography industry to make it a safer place for
I
generations to
see.
come. So that's
It
the
says
hope.
here, X Hamster is the only one that accepts Visa and MasterCard. Is that correct? So Pornhub, X Videos, X NXX, RedTube, and YouPorn, Visa and MasterCard are not accepted.
Yeah, they have cut off completely all of MindGeek's PornTube sites. And like I said, they owned
But the X
many
Hamster
of the
still
most
works.
popular X Hamster. If they're, I'm not sure about X Hamster actually, whether or not they have still have Visa and MasterCard processing for that site.
So
But
that
we
what
should find
scares
out and
me,
make sure.
what scares me is that Pornhub, which was everyone looked at it as a legitimate institution, just another tech firm that won awards, that was looked upon favorably by many. If a company like this was just a criminal organization, as you said, was a crime scene, what about all the other websites down the rank, the ones that were neglected, those niche websites that you can still find on Google? That's number one. Number two,
Yeah.
and why didn't Google? No one talks about Google. Why didn't Google de-index those websites?
Oh, you're absolutely correct in that Google. So we need to hold bad actors accountable, but they have enablers. They have enablers that allow this to happen, because on the PornTube sites, content is king. Like, that's one of the things that really stood out from employees that came forward from the site. They said on the PornTube sites, content is king, and they need to have massive amounts of content so that they could drive massive amounts of traffic to the site by being picked up in Google search results. So Google, one of the employees, one of the managers for Pornhub said this. They said Google is where Pornhub lives or dies. This is the same thing with all of the user-generated porn tube sites that would act in the same way. Google is where these sites live or die, because they rely on traffic in order to sell ads. And that's the business model. So Google, I think, really needs to be held accountable for actually serving up these search results to sites where they know that illegal content is proliferating on the sites. And I don't know if it's going to take a lawsuit against Google as well, like just like lawsuits have been filed against Visa for their role in this, and the hedge funds for their role in this. Colbeck Capital and Redwood Capital are being sued as well for funding the criminal enterprise. But should Google be held accountable? Yes, they should. I think they should. And to your point of all of these other websites, that's why, when we hold a company fully accountable, my hope is that we create that deterrent effect. So it's not just always a game of whack-a-mole. There'll always be these random sites, hosted in countries where maybe they pop up and they disappear. But as far as the mainstream user-generated porn industry, we're seeing most of the traffic in the world going to these sites. I think it's very possible that through litigation, through public pressure, so holding them accountable in the court of public opinion and the court of law, as well as criminal prosecution, we can create enough risk so that these companies make different decisions, so that they stop allowing illegal content to be uploaded on the site. It's just a risk-benefit calculation for these corporations. That's all it is. And we just have to continue to increase risk and eliminate profitability, and we will see change across the internet. I know we will, and we're already seeing some of that happen.
What's your position on the porn industry as a whole? in terms of the, because I listened to your interview with Theo Von. It was a really interesting interview because I know that he struggled with porn addiction. Um, and I started thinking about something I've never really thought of is porn in general, the positives and negatives. I first want to get your stance. Legal porn, so obviously no one underage, consent, but obviously there's still a lot of graphic things on there. Do you think that's still okay? Freedom of choice, freedom of speech, as long as it's not illegal?
I mean, my work is really specifically and, very particularly focused on the criminal content. So the illegal content, the crime scenes, right? That's being distributed online. As far as legal pornography, I mean, I believe in personal freedom. I believe that people should be able to choose what they want to do when they're adults, when they understand what they're getting into. I just believe in personal freedom. And so, our my work is not to go after the legal porn industry, it's to go after the sexual crime. Now, to say that, I also say that I recognize that even in the legal porn industry, there is a huge amount of issues. There's also a lot of exploitation. I mean, one of the lawsuits that Pornhub is facing right now is from a porn performer, right, who is in the studio professionally produced porn. Her name is Phoenix Marie, but she was exploited, and we've seen this again and again that even those in the traditional, kind of studio produced porn also get exploited and trafficked and face rape and abuse and all of that. So I'm not saying that doesn't happen. That does happen. There's also this really problematic trend on these sites of very violent, of genres that are depicting incest, genres, that are depicting teens. So, teens, right, could be anywhere from 13 to 19, and only two of those are legal. But what we've seen is this explosion, particularly in the US, of underage appearing content that actually is people who are over the age of 18, and they're wearing
Is
pigtails
that
and
is that legal?
braces, and there was a Supreme Court decision that it was Ashcroft versus Free Speech Coalition. Free Speech Coalition is the lobbying arm of the porn industry, that said that depictions of child sexual abuse, even if they're realistic, are legal and they're protected under the First Amendment. However, in other countries like Canada, you cannot depict somebody under the age of 18. Sorry, you can't depict an image of somebody that's underage, even if they're over the age of 18. So, like, the depiction of child pornography in Canada is illegal. So it's actually criminal in Canada to be having an 18-year-old that looks like they're 13 in a porn video. But this is something that's proliferating across the internet, and I think it's very harmful. I think it's dangerous to be feeding appetites for those who are underage and things of that nature.
So just out of curiosity, if you depict rape, for example, it's role playing rape on a porn website, is that also considered legal?
It is, yes, it is considered legal. Yeah. One of the things that was just so mind-boggling is that on these porn tube sites, yeah, you would have depictions of rape, but they're side by side with real rape. And the moderators who were tasked with the job of reviewing videos, there's no way they could tell the difference between rough sex and rape. They can't. They can't tell the difference between a 16-year-old body and an 18-year-old body on any consistent basis. Even a pediatrician could not do that. So we can never rely on moderation to solve this problem. That's why it goes back to age verification using government issued ID, documented consent as the only way. And AI can't do it either. So AI can't do anything that humans can't do, in the sense that AI can't determine a 16-year-old body from an 18-year-old. They can't determine rough sex from rape either. And so that's why platforms that are allowing this kind of content, they have to be verifying age and consent in order to not allow those videos to be being globally distributed and monetized. And another thing that was happening that I think is also really important, and it goes to the impact on victims. Victims call what happens to them when their rape or their abuse is distributed on sites like Pornhub, the immortalization of their trauma, because once it's online forever. this becomes like a sadistic game of whack-a-mole for them. So it's not enough to have policies where you say, oh, we'll take it down in 48 hours. That's great. I think that's so important. And we have now enacted laws in the United States recently that say we have to take it down. But we also have to prevent it from ever getting uploaded in the first place as well. And that's why we need those other standards to prevent this at the point of upload.
So going back to the question about the negative and positive impact of pornography. So in terms of negative impact, one thing I learned is something called porn-induced erectile dysfunction. And that was apparently very common, 33% in those aged 16 to 21. So essentially, kids, because of porn, kids are struggling to get erection. Does that last a long time? Have you looked into that condition? How serious is it?
Yeah, so I will just speak on this with a disclaimer that, the consumption side is not my area of expertise, but I've spent a long time investigating, reading, researching, and I'm aware of some of the issues that are going on with regard to consumption. And you're absolutely right that one of the things that young men and teens are facing is this porn-induced erectile dysfunction, and it's a real issue. But the good news is that the impact, the negative impacts of for example, this issue, and others that those who are, they feel they're addicted to porn might face are reversible. So what we understand is, there's this really beautiful thing called neuroplasticity, right? And it goes back to the word plastic, right? Where it's bendable. So as much as you can do harm by creating pathways in the brain when you're watching this kind of content, and you can face what we call habituation and desensitization and all of that, that can be reversed. So when you're able to kind of break the cycle of addiction, those things can be reversed, and many people are reporting that they see drastic improvement, that they get better after being able to overcome those addictions. And one of the things that, as I've been out on these podcasts and I've been speaking about this in the media and trying to raise awareness about what's happening behind the screen, one of the really encouraging things is I'm getting flooded with emails especially from young men, but also from women, who are saying that they got exposed to the free porn tube sites like Pornhub when they were very young. I mean, I even get messages from people who say they were 6 years old when they were first exposed to internet porn, and that they've been, addicted ever since. And now they're in adulthood, and it's really done damage to their life. But when they hear about the victims who are behind the screen, when they understand that who they may be watching, if they're on these free porn tube sites and they're not verifying age and consent, that they could be watching a real underage victim or somebody who's being raped, they said finally they have the ammunition they need to just be able to quit once and for all. And that's really encouraging. Another encouraging thing is that we're seeing in the US a wave of laws that are being passed to protect kids from accessing these online pornography websites. So Texas is kind of leading the charge, and they enacted age verification requirements for these sites, where it's not just an "Are you 18" click-through button that any 5-year-old could just click through and end up on Pornhub. And let me tell you, the front page of Pornhub in many cases, actually, we have evidence, and this is documented evidence, where they have actually had child abuse on the front page, the home page, so being promoted on the front page. But kids could just, in a few clicks, they could be on Pornhub, they could be on X Videos or X Hamster, and they could be watching the real or depicted rape or child abuse as their sex education. And so lawmakers across, not only in the US, but in Canada and the UK and other places and Europe are realizing the harm that this can do, and actually, shaping the sexual template of a generation of kids. And I call it a form of secondhand sexual abuse for children to have to be witnessing these crime scenes from a very young age. And so they're enacting those laws across the U.S.
I'm just perplexed as to, I remember posting about a sex trafficking ring on different social media platforms. The one I posted about was an investigation by the Wall Street Journal about 6 months ago or so on Instagram. And I know that social media platforms and Google are always held under a microscope. But I'm just perplexed as why Pornhub was neglected for so many years. Why didn't authorities take action until you and others started speaking out?
I mean, this is one of the most baffling things about this whole fight, is that it was hidden in plain sight since 2007. This wasn't the dark web. Like, this isn't some obscure website. I mean, this was out there. Like I said, the discovery that I made regarding the upload system was something that millions of people already knew who were uploading to Pornhub. And I think that it was just a matter of time. I think it's a matter of just placing a spotlight on this to, calling attention to it. I just think it was the right time. There's this saying that, there's an idea whose time had come. Like, this was an idea whose time had come to hold this company accountable. And I can't believe that it went that long without
Yeah, like
having
just
attention.
all it takes is like one adult watching it saying, "Holy shit, that looks real," and then, but I see everyone assumes it's role play. There's no other way. Otherwise,
Well,
everyone would
no,
be
I
calling
mean,
the
that's not
police.
true. It's not true because listen, they had 11 million comments on this site annually. And so many of those comments and so many of them that we have documented and are used as like evidence of their knowledge of what was going on is that people would be commenting, this is effing rape. This is sex trafficking. She's underage. That is a child. I mean, comment
Jesus.
after comment. And what they would do was they would censor the word child. They would censor the word underage when people would post those comments, but they wouldn't take down that video. They wouldn't even
So hold on, they
review
would
that video.
you couldn't write child in the comments,
No,
but
they
the
would
video
censor
had a
it.
child in there. Censor
Yeah,
it, as
so
in
they
it
would
wouldn't pop
just
up as a comment.
so they programmed their system to be able to detect when comments would say the word child. It would find the word, but it would just censor it. So it put asterisks. It would be like C
Oh, okay, yep.
asterisk ILD. So they would censor those words, rape, underage, child, but they would not review the video. They would not take down the video. All they would do was censor
That's pretty
the
useless.
comments.
Like if you put instead of child, you just put the stars in the middle. You haven't really
Well,
done anything.
it's not only useless, it's absolutely useless. But what it shows is knowledge. It shows that they had the ability
Exactly.
to know exactly what videos people were saying. Like, and I document a lot of this in my book where it's just, the comments from people that are saying like, this is a real victim. I know sex trafficking when I see it. I'm calling the authorities. They were flagged. So here's another thing. They enacted a purposeful policy where they had to have a video flagged by users over 15 times before it was put in queue for review by that one person they hired. So a video wouldn't even be reviewed unless somebody actually flagged it 16 times, and they made it hard to flag. So you actually couldn't just flag it as a user. You had to log in, you had to create an account, and then you actually had to be able to flag it. And then they would made it even harder, so you had to flag it 16 times. And now we have evidence in these court documents of prepubescent children who were on the site with millions of views, monetized views, granted, that are earning revenue for the executives, where they had 14 flags, they had 15 flags, they had 13 flags, and they were allowed to remain on the site. And we have emails from the CEO saying, they were reviewing this policy when they were starting to get in trouble with Visa and MasterCard in 2020. And they're reviewing this policy, and the CEO goes, this is good and reasonable. Like, he actually reviewed that and said, that's good and reasonable. I mean, it's just insane, the complicity.
Jesus. So there's a girl called her last name is Blue. Um, Bonnie Blue. So it's a girl that slept with 1,000 men in 24 hours, I think it was. And someone else slept with 100 men. So we're seeing that culture of just acceptance when it comes to sex and people being a lot more open about it. Now, I'm a believer in freedom of choice. Anyone could do whatever they want as long as they don't harm other people. I think you kind of hinted that you're in the same boat. People can have their opinions on it, but other people could do what they want in their privacy of their own home. But it just feels like culturally, sex is being perceived differently than it was 5, 10, 20 years ago. Can I get your thoughts on that in general? I know this is not what your organization, Trafficking Hub, focuses on, but I want to get your personal thoughts on the industry as a whole, culturally and as a business.
I'm not sure that people are kind of accepting of the fact that Bonnie is sleeping with 1,000 men. I think the reason why we're talking about it right now is because it's shocking and people are taken aback by it. I don't think if it wasn't so normalized, we wouldn't really be taking notice of it. It would just kind of be going under the radar because it would be so normal, right? The reason why I understand that it actually isn't normal is because there's so much attention on it. And I just think anybody with anyone who's a thinking person can understand the danger of that behavior, and the way from STDs to, I mean, I saw that some of the, I don't know, someone that was doing one of those scenes with her actually had to go get surgery for the damage that was done to her body after doing this
Oh.
with so many men. It's just, there's a
But
real actual
what
like
led to
harm
this?
aspect.
It is like again, I'm pretty open minded, but when I did the calculation, see, it's a man every minute and a half. I don't know if my math is correct because it's hard to understand. Um, why? Like, what led people to do this? What led
Yeah.
this to make her a famous person?
I can't speak into somebody's kind of mental state or why they actually do something, but kind of just thinking about it from kind of like in a functional way. It's like, maybe it's because there's money to be made. Maybe it's because there's so many clicks and views. Maybe because we're in a society today where we see this actually on the porn sites, where the more extreme you get, the more views and clicks, because people are getting desensitized. There is something real about desensitization where, for example, people who are struggling with porn addiction, compulsive porn use, they say that when they're kind of going down that road, they don't just need more porn. They need more extreme porn. They need something different, more extreme, maybe more violent, maybe younger, in order to get that same dopamine hit that they used to get from something that was more vanilla, right? And so maybe there is something there with regard to, and maybe this isn't just on an individual level. I mean, maybe this is more of society as a whole is getting desensitized to this kind of content in order to have the same reaction, right? In order to get the same views and clicks, we're seeing more and more extreme content. And, maybe it's a money thing. Maybe it's a clicks and views. Maybe it's about traffic. I'm not really sure, but it is a disturbing trend. That's for sure.
It's one I'm starting to dig into, especially since I started preparing for this interview. Um, Laila, my last question to you, and again, I just want to applaud you for what you've done. It's just incredible to be able to bring down such a large corporation. I understand you have people supporting you, but you also don't have a company with 100 people, with a legal team, with legal counsel, with marketers, etc., PR firm, to do all this. And I'm sure you started with a very small team. So I want to applaud you for that. And my question to you is, what could people do? So people right now, I'm sure a lot of listeners here, whether they admit it or not, they go to porn websites, whether on a daily basis or once or twice a year. What's your recommendation to them?
Well, I think demand plays a real big role in this. Without demand, there's not supply of criminal content. Uh, and so be careful, right? Be careful of where you are visiting. And I would stay far away from these porn tube sites that are not verifying the age and consent of those in the videos. But beyond that, if you want to get involved in this fight, look, we're not done. We've come a long way. We're not done yet. We still have a ways to go in not only holding Pornhub fully accountable lists. When we started, the call to action was, we are going to shut down Pornhub and we're going to hold its executives accountable. Pornhub has 9% of the content that they used to have from 2020. So yes, they've taken 91% down. They've got to go further than that. We want to see criminal prosecution. We want to see victims successful in their civil litigation. We want to see this conversation change in the court of law and the court of public opinion. And so that's the work that we're doing every day at my organization called the Justice Defense Fund. And if people want to get behind this effort, to not only hold this company accountable to create a deterrent effect, to actually make the internet a safer place for generations to come, they can go to justicedefensefund.org and you can join Team Takedown. So we've created Team Takedown. This is a group of dedicated individuals that are just saying enough is enough. Not only we're going to take down Pornhub, we're going to take down illegal content across the internet. So you can join Team Takedown. You can sign the petition. So join those millions of people. It's a powerful tool. People are still signing that petition every single day. It's growing. And so you can do that at the same site, or you can go to traffickinghubpetition.com and you can join and sign that petition. And you can buy the book. I wrote a book. You can see it behind me called Takedown Inside the Fight to Shut Down Pornhub. And you can go inside the fight. That story I was telling, I mean, you can get inside the fight. It's the journey of discovery with me, and all proceeds from the sale of the book support the cause and go to the Justice Defense Fund. So those are 3 easy things you can do.
And last thing, Laila, one quick question. Is there any adult websites that you'd recommend? Because we've talked about all the bad ones. We've mentioned a few of them earlier that are not doing enough. Is there any that are doing enough, even though you might culturally, ethically not agree with them? At least they're doing the right thing. So this way we can take demand away from the ones doing the wrong thing. OnlyFans, I'm assuming, is one. I hope my assumption is accurate.
I mean, they've started to be better. Again, in seeing Pornhub being held accountable, they started to change their policies. But even
That's
OnlyFans, we've had
OnlyFans? All of
yeah,
them
they
then.
have started to change their OnlyFans started to change their policies when they saw Pornhub being held accountable in the lawsuits and whatever. But it's hard for me to even recommend OnlyFans just for the fact that I have victims who have come forward that were abused on Pornhub, but also were abused on OnlyFans. And so I would
The
just say,
industry needs a
listen,
lot of
do
cleanup.
it needs a lot of cleanup, but do your own due diligence. Make your decisions based on your research. Look, and if you're a consumer, be careful. Like, we're careful when we try to consume things like coffee and chocolate, and we want to try to make sure that it's ethically sourced and all of that. And so do your research. And one thing it's hard for me to recommend where you should go. I mean, the safest thing is, if you want to view porn, make it yourself and view it yourself. But just avoid the porn tube sites that are these free porn sites that are not verifying age and consent. That is like the first place to go to just avoid. I mean, to avoid consuming criminal content. Just stay away from those sites.
Laila Mickelwait, really appreciate your time. It's a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much.